I think I'm an accidental VC. I grew up looking at the world very differently. Definitely, I didn't possess a fiscally right brain, and so the younger me will look at me today and go like, "What's wrong with you?"
The Business Lab.
Hi guys, welcome to yet another episode of the Business Lab podcast. My name is Abu Sofian, the founder of Khairu Consulting, and we help you become a person of buy-in. How do you get buy-in whenever you speak so that people choose you? Right? Today's guest is Mr. Khairu Rejal. Nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And today's podcast is sponsored by our venue sponsors, Craft by Tree and ID Entity, the very beautiful set you see here. And of course, our media magicians, StudioFive Corp. Thank you so much for all the production and the very creative skills to make us look really, really nice. Let me introduce him a little bit before we go in. So Khairu has 20 years of experience in climate, B2B, and deep tech investments across multiple regions. Right? He is the principal at Investible, and he has helped to scale companies that are now listed on NASDAQ and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. He founded Majulah Community. He focused on climate issues and youth empowerment while actively volunteering with various organizations. So Khairu, I think the natural question to ask, is what was your career trajectory like? How do you get into this role at Investible in the first place?
I think I'm an accidental VC. I grew up looking at the world very differently. Definitely, I didn't possess a fiscally right brain, and so the younger me will look at me today and go like, "What's wrong with you?" But I think a lot of my life decisions were really driven by impact and purpose and value creation. And so VC becomes a natural career choice, if you like, because of the ability to look at problems and challenges and then deploy liquidity investments into any of these companies that fundamentally are delivering value, solving pain points. Because fundamentally, from my perspective, every business out there needs to address a particular pain point, and the more that pain exists within the market, that's where you have scale, and then that's where you become a very lucrative business because you have the ability to kind of deliver your solution to a wide array of customers, and then therefore expose you to a larger addressable market, right? So to that end, right, that philosophy of creating value, solving problems, and driving liquidity to do that is quite natural within that sort of broader VC perspective. So that's been largely my life goals. That's how I've seen myself, and so one thing led to another, and I became an accidental VC.
Accidental VC. It's the first time I've heard that term. That's very interesting. So it sounds like it wasn't kind of a clear intention that you grew up saying to yourself, "I want to be a VC." No. So I guess the question is, since you are in VC, why specifically in the climate tech and the deep tech sector?
Yeah. So I think I can safely say that I've invested in a wide array of companies, from dating apps to therapeutics.
Okay.
And I know what you're thinking. Oh, dating app, that company must have burned a lot of money and it's sort of gone down the drain, which is not the case. So that's the company that's listed in NASDAQ. Therapeutics, a lot of people talk about long gestation and a lot of risk in getting their money back because it's a very binary outcome when you invest in therapeutics, in drugs and going into the drug discovery process. But those were companies that got listed into the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, for example. Wow. For $1 billion, and we invest at I can't say the number, but at a much more smaller valuation. So that gave a huge amount of return for the investors. But at some point, I felt that when we think about what are some of the existential challenges of the day, climate become quite apparent. And I think during COVID, when I guess most of us were locked out, that sort of interest, idea, or thesis around climate start to manifest even more. That's not to say that I've never really done climate in the past. I have. I have invested in climate companies, but not from a point of having a proper fund that has the sole focus in investing into climate. And so that's how I got involved with Investible, the current VC firm that I'm with, where they were already starting to look into climate, and I thought some of the know-how, knowledge that I've got in the broader VC investing, sort of understanding and also understanding around how this region works would add some level of value to what Investible were doing in Australia, and as they were trying to expand out into Southeast Asia, and really double-clicking within the broader climate sort of ecosystem. So that sort of naturally clicked, and the opportunity sort of came nicely, and that's how I joined Investible, and really now spending more time to really look out for investments within the space of climate, and whilst trying at the same time finding other coalition partners, because this whole climate thing is not just going to be like a one solution, like a magic wand. It requires a huge coalition, from policymakers to investors, through other financing providers, through entrepreneurs, sources of IP and innovation, the universities, the research institutes. But how do we then sort of put everyone into a common platform, or try to get everyone onto a common platform, so then we can drive hard in hitting some of the targets of 2030, making sure the temperature doesn't get anything higher than beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius that the globally the Paris Accord talks about a lot.
Right. So I understand that you definitely focus on climate tech and deep tech. So perhaps for the listeners, how do you what is the distinction between climate tech and deep tech?
Yeah.
What is deep tech? Yeah.
So typically, deep tech companies, number one, I think there's a few attributes for deep tech companies. Usually, deep tech companies tend to be more horizontal in its technology application as opposed to a vertical application. To give you an example, when you think about generative AI, for example, which is the talk of town these days, although I think it's extremely hyped out, but that's a whole different conversation. Gen AI is an example of a horizontal technology, which could be applied across multiple spectrum. And when, on the other hand, a vertical application is when you have certain technologies or certain companies coming in to enable itself with generative AI, with AI, to address certain, sectorial issues within, say, logistics, within say, e-commerce, or within marketing, or within enterprise sales, enterprise softwares, and that sort of whole spectrum of companies. And so therefore, they look into some of these sectors, use generative AI, use AI, and enable itself to deliver some of this solution. So back to your point about deep tech is that sort of number one horizontal kind of application. So that's number one. I think the other attribute would be typically companies or innovation that comes with very, very strong IP and know-how, for which very few people have that sort of understanding. And I think the other component with regards to how do you define deep tech companies usually is that these are companies that tend to be more requires more investing, because you don't necessarily see the outcome and the top line of these companies anytime soon, and obviously has a higher barrier to entry kind of thing. So that would be how I think, or how I would attribute deep tech companies as.
Okay, that's a great, very, very good introduction to what deep tech and climate tech is. So I think the natural question next would be, okay, knowing what deep tech and climate tech is, let's zoom out a little bit, right? Why do people actually go with VCs? And there are so many VCs out there, in particular Investible. Like what makes Investible different as a VC?
Maybe I'll go back to climate tech, because I realized I didn't talk about climate tech as well. So we've talked about deep tech. I think climate tech would be companies that obviously addresses issues around climate concerns, largely decarbonization. Right, and so to that end, when you look at many of these climate tech companies, the solution that they deliver also looks into decarbonization, among others. But decarbonization is that sort of a big target. Like right now, we have more than 60 gigaton of greenhouse gas out there. 51% are in APEC. China takes the cake, but number 2 is ASEAN, right? And so to that end, driving greenhouse gas emission down is quite critical in ensuring that we don't breach that 1.5 degrees Celsius sort of threshold. And so to that end, a lot of these climate companies are delivering that goal, but across multiple geography and across multiple sectors. So climate tech companies are typically companies that drive down those greenhouse gas emission across multiple geographies and also across multiple different sectors, be it in power generation, be it in transportation, be it in industrial application. And then you can even break it down even more. Say, for example, within the space of transportation, how do we decarbonize transportation within air, land, sea, right? So when we talk about land, we're talking about EV vehicles, right? Or even hydrogen vehicles, right? So that's one example. And so when we think about aviation, some people are talking about hydrogen planes, which I think is going to take a while, but others are thinking about sustainable aviation fuel. So to that end, you can use biofuels, or you can use UCOs, or use cooking oil, right? To put up fuel into the fuselage and fly to New York, right? So that's one example. Or even within the space of shipping, looking into methane, for example, or green methane for that matter. And so those are steps that can be taken today. And that will significantly drive down carbon emission, say, for example, within the space of transportation, but also in other sectors like hydrogen, for example. Others are looking into nuclear reactors, like small ones, in order to find alternatives against coal, against LNG, which are fossil fuels, which are in the long run not good for the environment.
I see. Okay. So I think back to the question of like why Investible as a VC compared to other VCs?
Number one, I think it's not just about Investible per se, but I think there is really not a lot of dedicated climate VCs out there in APEC. It's really a handful. And so unfortunately, the option is not as wide. And then the question begs, why then go with a climate-focused VC as opposed to any other VC out there? A climate-focused VC would have certain mandate and expectations that would be more aligned with climate tech companies, right? For example, with regards to how we think about carbon emissions, right? If you are dealing with an investor that does not have those kind of targets in mind, then those would not be some of the measurable success that any of these more broader VCs look at.
Yeah.
And so therefore, a lot of those communication or dovetailing certain level of expectation, success outcome, how the success looks like, will vary. As opposed to a climate tech VC who looks into financial return, but also in addition to that, looks into climate impact, decarbonization, right? And so then you'll find more like-minded individuals on your shareholders' bench,
Right.
and so then they become allies and they're able to support you.
Okay.
But I think above and beyond that, actually, so Investible, we are known to be an Australian VC, but now with presence in Singapore. So we have offices in both Sydney and Singapore. Aside from the funds that we're managing, we also run Australia's largest co-working space, 4,000 square meters, called Greenhouse. So it's called Greenhouse. You can Google it up. It's in George Street, on the Circular Quay side, not on the Chinatown side. I would joke. I'm not sure whether you should take that out. But the point is, we have that sort of nice view of Sydney. You have the bridge, you have the Opera House, and you have Circular Quay. But above and beyond the real estate and that beautiful view is the programs that we run within Greenhouse, where we try to amalgamate like-minded individuals within the space of climate across investors, other entrepreneurs, policymakers together, and then try to create this sort of community and cross-pollinate ideas so that we can drive hard again at hitting some of those targets. In addition to that, for non-Australian companies who are looking into Australia, obviously Greenhouse offers a nice soft landing to enter the Sydney market. And again, beyond just sitting and enjoying the view, a lot of these non-Australian companies coming through our program would have access to our other partners and be a part of that community within Sydney itself. And so you're not just physically there, but you also have the ability to connect with folks within Sydney itself, right? Through this platform that we create. So in addition to investing, we have this ecosystem that we are creating. We have this infrastructure that we also manage. And in addition to that, we also run Australia's oldest syndicate network. So a syndicate network is a platform where ultra high net worth individuals, i.e. angel investors, come in and then they co-invest together into any of the companies that we invest, or in certain companies that, within that platform they would have certain interest in. The value for a platform like Club Investible is not so much the net worth. It's definitely there because we have more than 200 individuals who are like first, second, third generation business owners in Australia, Sydney, Melbourne. We also have C-levels of like your Comsbank or NEB or Blackmore, some of these more known Australian brands. But it's not so much for the net worth, although it's there, but it's more so for the network. Because now you have access to some of these C-level of listed companies, you have access to these family offices that has deep knowledge and assets, and are looking for technology and solutions that can improve their overall performance. So that's how I think we're quite unique. We don't just passively sit down and invest. We have the infrastructure, we have the ecosystem, and we have our own proprietary platform that manages our own ultra high net worth individuals to also co-invest together with the fund, for which many of these portfolio companies can leverage on for network.
So I guess there's a lot of activity going on definitely in Sydney, but I wanted to zoom it back here in Southeast Asia. As someone who has a lot of experience in the VC space here in Southeast Asia, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you feel are much more context relevant in the Southeast Asian market space for VCs?
Within the space of climate?
Yes.
I mean, like I said, right? I mean, 60 gigaton of greenhouse gas currently globally, with 51% of those being emitted out of APEC, of which China is number one, but ASEAN is easily number two, right? So ASEAN as a bloc is the second largest carbon emitter within APEC. And so when we think from that perspective, that is actually an opportunity for a lot of companies who are looking to address this challenge and try to help in reducing carbon emission across Southeast Asia, across ASEAN countries. So the white space is significant, right? Number one. And number two, to that end, a lot of the large institutions, companies, organizations within ASEAN today recognize that they need to decarbonize, and a lot of it is driven by policies or policies that are coming right, across all ASEAN countries. Obviously, Singapore is taking the lead, but Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, right? A lot of these policies and regulation are coming out quite rapidly. And so the need for these companies, large companies within ASEAN to decarbonize is quite significant. And so therefore, a lot of these solutions are required within Southeast Asia. Number three, Southeast Asia, remain to be one of the more resilient region globally, with a lot of social mobility, with a lot of significant young population, significant growth, and in addition to that, a lot of consumer demand for climate resilient products.
Right. So, Khairu, I'm hearing a lot of opportunities. You also mentioned the word white space. However, at the same time, what are the challenges if someone, this looks like a great opportunity, but hey, let's be real here. What are some of the real obstacles that you have to jump, over so that you can actually break through? From your experience, what are those things that people need to know?
I think when people think about ASEAN, and this has been talked about a lot, but maybe requires more repeating, is that ASEAN is not a single block, and ASEAN is actually quite disparate.
Right.
And with that, you are actually dealing with regulations and policies that are unique to each market. Right, so Jakarta will be different from Kuala Lumpur, will be different from Bangkok, will be different from Singapore, and then you're looking, in addition to the market itself and how the market behave and operate, you are looking into different regulation policies, government stages of readiness. Right, whilst the overall trend is positive, but that readiness require maybe some level of time, but I think it's coming. But it's just that it requires some level of patience in engaging. Number three, infrastructure. Infrastructure remains some of the challenges within Southeast Asia. There's a lot of liquidity now going into Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, to support in Indonesia, to support and enhance the infrastructure within those markets. But that is also some of those challenges that one needs to think about and overcome and sort of price in as one thing about strategy within ASEAN and within each of these markets.
So then here comes another opposing force, or rather a force in the market, which is the government and the policies. Right? What are some of the policies from governments that perhaps people who are interested in such a space need to know about? When it comes to starting a business in such a space?
I think the most important thing for anybody who wants to venture and go out and do their own business is to understand that there is no substitute to hard work. Hard work comes first. Everything else comes second. Because we do know that people view business owners as kurang boss. You guys are bosses, you guys drive nice cars and you guys stay in nice places. Yeah, but you don't understand the struggles to get there. I personally tell myself this: do or do not, there's no try. Courtesy of Yoda.
I think the tailwind is really around a lot of conversations with regards to ESG. So I think that's a positive.
Right.
I think the creation of carbon tax and carbon credits
Right.
as well. So I'm not a big fan of carbon tax and carbon credit because the maturity of that value chain is still one thing, although the trend seems to be positive, but that there's still some level of questions that need to be asked, right? But the fact that some of these conversations are happening also drive the tailwind into this space. I think some of the challenges that one need to think about, again, the readiness of the different governments is something that needs to be baked into some of the strategy. But I would say in the overall scheme of things, governments are looking into the climate space. So you look at Indonesia, for example.
Yes.
Indonesia doesn't want to be selling its commodities for EV batteries anymore, right? This is where when you look at Jokowinomics, as they call it, you think about hilirisasi or downstreaming. So that's big on his agenda, and I think that's something that will continue to cascade with the new leadership that's coming in end October. And so to that end, this idea of downstreaming, which means that with some of the raw materials that they have, they're looking to create final products within, say, for example, the EV battery spaces. And so that tells you that the government of Indonesia have already considered green industry as that next wave of industrialization, and in so doing create more green jobs. Malaysia as well, right? Anwar Ibrahim, one of the big agenda is also to look into this energy transition, and there's also conversations, although it's sort of uncertain, I would say at this point, but but there were talks about creating Tesla's manufacturing facilities within Malaysia itself, and that will create more jobs, green jobs, right? You look into solar, for example. Obviously China has taken the lead in solar development and solar manufacturing from what traditionally would be something that you see in the US. But China now, because of a lot of this macro situation, requires a +1 policy. So China +1 policy means that therefore you'll find some of these facilities being built, being developed in, say, Thailand or in Malaysia or in Indonesia. And so all of this actually paints that view to the governments that the green economy is that next wave in creating green jobs and in addressing unemployment, but also providing better paying jobs for their own citizens. So above and beyond compliance, this has become quite a utility for them, or I would say a strategy in pushing that new growth for each of these markets. So all in all, it's, in my view, it's pretty positive. But obviously, again, time, bureaucracy are things that we just need to bake into some of this consideration.
Right. Just now, I noted that you mentioned the word high barrier of entry, especially in this space. Is that more of a bane or a boon, the fact that there is a high barrier to entry, therefore not many people want to enter the space and fill up that white space, so to speak? Or is it a good thing because it means that it's a blue ocean, there's a lot of opportunity here?
Yes and no. I think number one, when in my mind, when we take a step back and when we look at the market, there are gonna be winners and losers, right? And so how you compete within those markets is always a function of differentiation, ability to scale fast, ability to capture as much of a market share as possible. Having a high barrier to entry would be one strategy that one deploy, but there are companies out there that don't really have a high barrier to entry, or the high barrier to entry is not just the scientific technology and IP know-how,
right,
but it's the network effect that they're able to create is a function of execution, is a function of the ability to gain as much stakeholders as possible.
Okay, that's very interesting take. Yeah, so let's like zoom out a little bit. So you founded Majulah Community, and Majulah Community addresses climate issues and also it's about youth empowerment. Could you tell us a little bit about how your work intersects with Majulah Community?
Majulah Community was a project of passion because there was a gap in developing pipeline of leaders within, say, the Malay Muslim youth community, and in addition to that, the bigger question here is how do we expose these individuals into the broader challenges of the day and giving them access into the broader ASEAN region. And so therefore a lot of the service learning programs that eventually we run is actually a platform that allows many of these Singaporean youth to engage with their Southeast Asian compatriot, and in doing so gain a better understanding, appreciation, empathy for Southeast Asia, which in the longer scheme of things is quite a powerful utility because Southeast Asia is booming for growth in the next 10 to 20 and even 30 years. And so having some of this relationship at such a formative period of one's life and hopefully continuing this relationship with some of these other individuals in other ASEAN markets has that sort of butterfly effect in the future, right? A lot of the networks that I have in the region is because when I was younger as a maybe student youth leader of sort, engaging with many of these folks in Jakarta, in Bangkok, in Kuala Lumpur are quite useful because these are individuals that I lean on today and we have developed great relationship across our own borders, right? And so that was one of the main reason why we were quite focused on a lot of this overseas service learning type of program. But I would say above and beyond that, I'm also now actively involved with AMP as well.
Okay.
So I'm also doing some activities there in helping to provide training, especially within the space of cybersecurity,
right,
to Muslim professionals.
Yes.
Or mid-career professionals, and so that is something that potentially you will hear very soon. But that is also something that I'm also actively involved on the side as well. In addition to, investing and all this other stuff that I'm doing within Investible.
Right. So I guess the youth are the future. What do you think the future holds for the deep tech industry?
What does the future hold for the deep tech industry? I think maybe I would frame the question around what are the challenges that are facing Southeast Asia. Big market, 650 million, I think now 700 million population. Indonesia gives birth to one Singapore every year.
Wow.
And so they continue to grow, right? I think now population of Indonesia is breaching 300 million. And very soon, in the next 5 years, it will be 320 million. And every other market within Southeast Asia is growing. So it's a huge market. And so therefore, the question then is, what are some of the challenges that exist within those markets? And I think entrepreneurs need to look at some of these challenges as opportunities and then delivering solutions in addressing these opportunities. They can choose to use, climate tech, deep tech, what I think whatever technology that they employ is quite arbitrary.
Yes. Because
ultimately technology becomes a commodity, right? If you are just starting doing Gen AI now, it's too late, right? So technology will always be a commodity. But what really drives technology is the problems and challenges that humanity or the market possess, and therefore as entrepreneurs, how do we deliver solutions in those markets, and in doing so, prosper and grow, right? And so therefore, you could, in this case, maybe have your cake and eat it, where you can deliver solutions, you can elevate problems, and yet prosper and gain significant return for those efforts.
Yeah, very positive outlook. Thank you so much, Khairu, for being a guest on our show. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And of course, to our venue sponsors, Identity and Craft by 3. Thank you so much for the set and the space. And our media magicians, StudioFive Corp, for the production as well. If you are seeing this on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, wherever you find your podcast, please share and like and comment. You might see a description box there. There's a survey, so you could click on it. Tell us how we can improve the episodes. And we'll catch you for the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.